Barcelona Airport has always been a busy place. People from all over the world hurried through its wide corridors, pulling their suitcases and carrying their expectations. Some were traveling for leisure, others for work. Some were on dream vacations, while others raced against time so as not to miss important commitments. There was always a constant buzz, flight announcements, people speaking different languages, last-minute calls over the loudspeakers, and the excited voices of those about to board. Among the crowd, the police officers responsible for security also moved around. Dressed in well-kept uniforms with watchful eyes, they walked through the lounges, the departure and arrival gates, and the corridors connecting waiting rooms to various check-in areas, always observing passenger behavior, ensuring nothing strayed from the norm. However, not everything can be seen with human eyes alone. That's why, years ago, the airport started relying on detection dogs, a canine team trained to use their superpowered sense of smell to identify illegal substances, explosives, and other potential threats. These dogs, generally called sniffer dogs, begin their training when they are still puppies. They go through tests of behavior, health, and aptitude until they are selected for police work. Among them was a very special dog, Max, a robust German shepherd with a well-groomed coat and a serious gaze, who at 10 years old already had an extensive record of service. Max was known and admired by many police officers at the airport, as well as by the most frequent travelers. His reputation came from many solved cases, with a main focus on finding drugs and explosives. However, Max's fame wasn't merely glamorous. It consisted of real stories of hard work and, above all, a sense of smell that rarely failed. Jake, Max's trainer and handler, had been with him since he was a puppy. They had forged an unbreakable bond, built on mutual trust and numerous risky situations they had faced together. A police dog trainer's job at the airport might seem simple. At first glance, leading the animal on a leash and checking the areas where it passes. But those who live that routine know there's much more involved. You need to know all the signals the dog might give, respect its physical and emotional limits, and above all, understand its instincts. That morning, Barcelona Airport was as busy as usual. Airplanes from various airlines landed and took off non-stop, coming from countries like France, Russia, Brazil, the United States, Egypt, China, and so many other regions. The loudspeakers announced arriving and departing flights, and the arrivals hall was constantly receiving hugging families, rushed executives, and curious tourists. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, the security team remained alert to any abnormalities. Before heading out to work that day, Max went through his morning exercise and warm-up routine. Jake always spent a few minutes keeping the dog physically active because, despite being relatively old for a working dog, 10 years, Max still maintained remarkable vitality. The trainer began the day with a brisk walk around the police center's internal courtyard at the airport, letting Max sniff around freely. Then they moved on to brief obedience sessions, commands to sit, lie down, stay, retrieve objects. Max performed everything precisely, receiving in the end a few pats and sometimes small treats as a reward. The second part of the training involved presenting inert substances that mimicked the odors of explosives, drugs, and other illicit materials. Even after years on the job, continuous practice ensured that Max's sense of smell remained sharp. Whenever Max detected the specific smell Jake had set up for the exercise, the dog gave a characteristic sign. He would suddenly stop, stare at the source of the odor, wag his tail in a restrained way, and maintain an alert expression. For Jake, it was the unmistakable sign that something suspicious was there. The bond between Max and Jake was not limited to working hours. They had spent sleepless nights on special missions, cold nights in outdoor areas of the airport, and dangerous situations where they had to evacuate certain areas. They had shared fears, tensions, and small daily victories, all of which created a bond of mutual trust. Nevertheless, in recent weeks, a debate had arisen among the higher-ups about the possibility of retiring Max and replacing him with a younger dog. Max was an admired hero, but command was concerned about the dog's well-being, fearing that health problems could arise as he aged. Jake, on the other hand, felt that Max was not ready to leave the service, as he was still very efficient. The dog's insistence on pointing out any sign of danger and his always exemplary conduct spoke louder than any bureaucratic concern. On that particular morning, while the airport bustled, Jake and Max began their rounds through the terminals. The scene was practically the same every day. People in line for check-in, families with chattering children, a few worried faces checking their watches, hoping there wouldn't be any delays. Max sniffed the air around him, apparently calm. Many airport staff, already used to it, greeted the pair. At one of the arrival gates, a recently arrived flight from Russia brought several passengers with large, eye-catching luggage. Some carried souvenirs and typical items, others had hand luggage, and of course, there were suitcases of all sizes. While they walked around the baggage carousels, Max suddenly stopped. His body stiffened, his ears pricked up, and his tail stopped wagging. He was standing before an apparently ordinary suitcase, dark in color, with no eye-catching stickers, the kind most people carry on long trips. A dark-haired man of medium height had just set it down, apparently in a hurry. Jake immediately noticed Max's behavior. "What's up, boy?" he asked, kneeling beside the dog. Max sniffed the suitcase a few more times, circling it, then gave the unmistakable sign, a slight wag of the tail, but with a fixed look at the object as if saying, "There's something off here." Alert, Jake grabbed his radio and requested backup. People nearby, upon seeing the police dog intensely sniffing the baggage, began to back away, following instructions from the security agents. The atmosphere became slightly tense. The police set up a perimeter, asking passengers to move to a safer area, while the bomb squad specialists were called to inspect the contents. In many incidents, such interventions turned out to be nothing major. Sometimes the dog detected residues of legal substances whose odor was similar to something suspicious, or the owner of the suitcase had carried some harmless chemical product resembling explosives. But that day, Max's insistence was unusual. The dog wouldn't leave the suitcase, letting out occasional barks as if wanting to emphasize that this was not just a false alarm. While the police surrounded the suitcase, the man who had left it by the carousel, identified on the baggage ticket as Ryan, walked away quickly, saying he needed to use the bathroom. This did not immediately raise suspicion. After all, every passenger needs to use airport facilities at some point. Still, security cameras began following him at a distance. Max, however, remained uneasy. Even after the bomb squad arrived, performing an initial check for explosives, he still clearly indicated the suitcase. Jake noticed that, unlike other situations in which Max would relax when given the rest command after the experts gave some sort of clearance that there was no bomb, the dog would not calm down. Max growled softly, letting out short barks, pulling at the leash whenever Jake tried to move him away. "I've never seen him act like this," commented a fellow officer. "He usually trusts the specialists completely. If he's that restless, there must be something in there." Although the suspicion of explosives had been ruled out by the equipment, something about the suitcase unsettled Max. There was only one option left: to open it for a manual check, with all due caution, as there might be another kind of illicit material inside. A few minutes later, Ryan returned to the scene, but upon seeing the police around his suitcase and Max barking frantically, he panicked. He started gesturing, sweating, and trying to push past the security barriers to get to his luggage. He was saying, "Hey, that suitcase is mine, but there's nothing wrong. Please, I need a medication that's in there. You can't just open my suitcase like that." Ryan's anxiety and nervous state were interpreted as even more suspicious signs. Two officers restrained him, asking him to calm down. He tried to offer jumbled explanations about special food in the suitcase, but it didn't convince anyone. Jake watched every move and knew from years of experience that such behavior was typical of someone with a lot to hide. With great care, and after obtaining the necessary legal authorization to open the luggage, given the strong suspicion of illegal or potentially dangerous contents, the specialists began unzipping the suitcase. Max, upon seeing them start, stopped barking, but was clearly tense, eyes locked on every detail. As soon as they pulled the zipper open, a strange odor wafted out. The officers, wearing gloves, lifted the top of the suitcase, carefully moving aside possible fabrics and plastics that covered something. People nearby, though kept at a distance, tried to sneak a peek. Jake, keeping Max by his side, was anxious about what they might find. Finally, when the suitcase was fully opened, they were faced with a shocking sight. 3 kittens, very small, from a rare breed, filthy and seemingly in poor health. At first there was a mixture of surprise, relief that it wasn't explosives, and then dismay. Why would someone transport such fragile kittens hidden inside a suitcase? Why had Max reacted so strongly? Perhaps the smell of something around the animals, secretions, parasites, vomit, blood, urine, had alerted the dog. Indeed, the kittens were extremely weak, breathing with difficulty, meowing softly, a sound that broke the hearts of all who witnessed it. Ryan, still held by 2 officers, began to cry and kept repeating desperately, "No, you don't understand, they're not mine. I was just doing someone a favor. I didn't know they were sick." Jake, meanwhile, raised his hand, signaling everyone to keep calm, then said, "We need to get them to a vet immediately. If they remain in this state, they might die." Max, upon seeing the kittens, drew back a bit, as he wasn't used to dealing directly with such small animals. But his eyes conveyed compassion. In some way, he knew he had saved their lives. The police officers were almost unanimous in their reaction. Many were moved, some wiped away tears at the sight of such vulnerable creatures. It was unusual to find in a suspicious suitcase defenseless young animals in danger. As soon as the suitcase was opened and the discovery was made, one of the officers called the local police's Animal Protection Service, arranging immediate transport of the kittens to a partner shelter with on-call veterinarians. At the same time, the official investigation protocol began, identifying the microchips in each animal, checking if there was a record of theft or trafficking, and tracking the route traveled. Max was praised for his impeccable sense of smell. Had it not been for his persistence, the suitcase might have gone unnoticed, leaving the kittens doomed to a cruel fate. Jake, however, noticed the expression on some of his superiors who still wanted to retire Max. "He's already 10 years old. How much longer can he keep this up?" The kind of comment that sometimes reached Jake's ears. But at that moment, the day's hero had a name, and it was Max. Meanwhile, at the shelter, the veterinary team got straight to work. The kittens were malnourished, full of parasites, dehydrated, and likely traumatized by being confined in the suitcase. They needed to have fleas and ticks removed, wounds treated, fluids administered, and be gradually fed to help their bodies recover. A vet named Laura coordinated the team, administering injections, prescribing medications, and giving medicinal baths to the little ones. Laura was moved by the state of the kittens, but determined to save them. One of the shelter volunteers, Carmen, leaned over a small makeshift cage to keep them warm, using soft blankets. "They're so tiny. Who would do something like this?" Carmen said, indignant. The atmosphere was urgent, as every minute counted to save these lives. The weakest kitten could barely open its eyes, trembling and letting out a very faint meow. However, slowly, with fluids and warmth, it stabilized, showing that it was quite a little fighter. To understand Max's reaction to this incident, it's worth revisiting his past. As a puppy, Max had been selected from a kennel of German shepherds, known for their intelligence and versatility, to join the police canine training program. Jake, a young officer at the time, was immediately captivated by the puppy's attentive and clever gaze. Thus began a partnership spanning almost a decade. Jake's first remarkable memory with Max was the dog's concern for a small cat that lived at the training center. The kitten, having appeared there abandoned, wandered between the kennels, frightened, unsure whether to approach or run from the dogs. While most of the dogs barked or ignored the cat, Max calmly approached, sniffed, and lay down next to it, respecting its space. It was the first time Jake realized Max had a kind of natural empathy, something beyond the ordinary. Over the years, Max and Jake participated in rescue operations for victims of building collapses, searches for missing people in wooded areas, around Barcelona, and of course, the daily routine at the airport, which included preventing drug and explosive trafficking. There were many nights on duty, official presentations for children in schools, grueling training sessions, and above all, a lot of togetherness. That's exactly why Jake felt how special Max was. Not just a tool in police service, but a loyal friend with a rare sensitivity. Upon learning that Max had discovered sick kittens at the airport, Jake immediately recalled the old incident with the cat at the training center. Clearly, Max had a protective instinct not only for humans, but also for other vulnerable creatures. While the kittens were receiving medical care, the police intensified their investigation of Ryan, the man who was transporting the suitcase. He was detained and taken to an interrogation room at the airport. An experienced investigator, Sergeant Ruiz, led the questioning. "So Ryan, tell us again, where did these cats come from?" I was just doing a favor," Ryan stammered, sweating. "I was asked to bring this suitcase to Barcelona. They told me it was just special food. I didn't know there were cats inside." "Special food? Inside a sealed suitcase with no ventilation?" countered the sergeant, unconvinced. Meanwhile, forensic analysts examined Ryan's cell phone and found suspicious conversations. Coded messages indicating involvement in an exotic animal trafficking scheme. There were photos of various animal babies, addresses, and amounts in foreign currencies, all pointing to an international network. The suitcase from Russia, plus the fact that the breed of cat was rare and valuable on the black market, reinforced the suspicion that Ryan was part of a criminal ring. This suspicion was further confirmed by each kitten's implanted microchip, which belonged to a zoo in Egypt that had reported the disappearance of some felines some time ago. The smuggling route appeared to cross several countries, finally reaching the black market in parts of Western Europe. Given the evidence, Ryan was placed under preventive arrest. He tried to contact lawyers, but the situation was serious. Animal trafficking, animal cruelty, and the violation of international wildlife protection laws. Some of his messages even mentioned bribing customs officials at certain airports to facilitate the transport of these living commodities. The case promised to draw significant media attention both nationally and abroad. It didn't take long for news of the rescued kittens to spread through the local media and then internationally. Newspapers and news websites published pieces with headlines such as "Police Dog Discovers Rare Kittens in Suitcase and Stops Smuggling," and "Heroic German Shepherd Saves Trafficked Kittens." Various TV channels approached the police to interview Jake, and of course, to show Max on camera. The dog received a special bath to look presentable for filming, but on the day of the interview, he maintained his serious demeanor typical of a working dog. Even so, shots of the German Shepherd staring into the camera with bright, focused eyes moved the audience. "He deserves a medal," many people said on social media. The increased visibility led to anti-animal trafficking campaigns and spurred discussions about the need for stricter laws and more effective inspections at airports and borders. Many were shocked to think that defenseless kittens could be smuggled in suitcases so mercilessly. At the same time, the shelter caring for the kittens received a flood of donations and adoption requests. Photos of the 3 little felines were posted, and many families showed interest in giving them a permanent home once they were healthy and cleared by the vets. Even those who couldn't adopt offered to help financially, donating medicine, food, supplements, and whatever else was needed. Meanwhile, Max gained many fans on social media. Some admirers even created photo montages and caricatures of the German Shepherd wearing a superhero cape. Despite the public buzz, Jake kept a steady work routine for Max, ensuring the dog wouldn't be overworked or stressed by too much attention. Max continued to be a police officer on duty at the airport, and that was his priority. A few weeks went by after the kittens were rescued. At the shelter, the veterinary team celebrated each bit of progress. The initial phase was critical, stabilizing the kittens' health, eradicating infections, worms, parasites, and ensuring they received sufficient nutrients to gain weight in a healthy way. Veterinarian Laura and volunteer Carmen monitored the kittens day and night. They fed them special bottles for orphaned or neglected kittens, as they weren't ready to eat solid food. In the first week, they were still very frail, but as the days passed, they became more active, opening their eyes fully, timidly walking around the safe environment provided by the shelter, and even trying to play with each other. They gave them temporary names, Nilo, Cleo, and Pharaoh, in reference to their Egyptian origins, as discovered through the microchips. The three had short fur in a yellowish tone with dark patches, typical of exotic felines rarely seen outside specialized breeding programs. As they recovered, they became even more beautiful and curious, exploring their surroundings with alert eyes. During the process, there was concern that one of them might not survive, given the terrible conditions they were found in. But to everyone's relief, all three pulled through and made a full recovery. Moved, Carmen recorded their daily improvements in her personal journal. Today, Nilo purred when I picked him up. Cleo, the female, is more active and runs from one side to the other meowing. Pharaoh is the calmest, but he perks up when we pet behind his ears. Once the kittens were stable and out of danger, the shelter organized a special thank you visit for Jake and Max. They wanted the detection dog to see for himself and sniff for himself the outcome of his heroic act. So on a quiet late afternoon, Jake brought Max to the shelter. Right upon entering, Max sniffed the air curiously. Many enclosures housed rescued animals from different situations, dogs that were mistreated, abandoned cats, and sometimes even wild birds that would be sent to rehabilitation centers. However, Max was immediately drawn to the unmistakable scent of the three kittens he had found. Guided by Jake and Laura, the German Shepherd arrived at a makeshift pen where the kittens were playing with colorful balls. Seeing Max, the kittens showed some curiosity but not fear. They just stopped playing and observed him. Perhaps they recognized his scent or sensed that the large, imposing dog wasn't a threat. Max, in turn, approached slowly, wagging his tail in a friendly manner, ears up, but with no barking or growling. Carmen was moved by the sight. A dog trained to detect explosives and apprehend criminals was now calmly standing before three tiny kittens that owed him their lives. The kittens took cautious steps toward Max, sniffing him. Cleo, the boldest female, brought her nose up to Max's. He responded by gently licking her forehead, a caring gesture that brought tears to the eyes of everyone watching. Jake, standing beside Laura, whispered, "You're amazing, Max. I never doubted it." Some camera flashes captured the moment. The pictures would later go viral online, touching hearts worldwide. It was one of the most moving scenes of interspecies interaction, a bond forged by heroism and compassion. While the atmosphere at the shelter was joyful, the police side of the case was still moving full steam ahead. Ryan, the man arrested at the airport, went through lengthy interrogations. Investigators found suspicious bank transfers, encrypted messages, and names of possible accomplices. There were ties in Russia, Egypt, and other European countries, suggesting a well-organized network of exotic animal trafficking. In cooperation with international authorities, Spanish police launched a large-scale operation to dismantle the scheme. Documents revealed that the group wasn't just trafficking kittens, but also birds, reptiles, and even larger animals, smuggled via air, sea, or land routes, for buyers willing to pay hefty sums to keep illegal pets or resell them to even wealthier collectors. Confronted with the evidence, Ryan tried to negotiate a reduced sentence by informing on other members of the ring. He claimed he had huge debts and was persuaded to commit the crime in return for a financial reward. Still, that didn't change the fact that he'd transported animals in cruel conditions. The judge maintained the preventive detention, given the seriousness of the crime. Armed with Ryan's revelations, more arrests followed. A clandestine zoo in Russia was uncovered, where animals were bred without regulations. Egyptian authorities were also involved, as the rare cats originated from a legitimate breeding center that had been raided by smugglers months before. It was an important blow to the criminal organization, but sadly the trafficking of animals remained a global problem on a massive scale. Still, each victory served as a breath of hope. Despite all the praise and public recognition Max received, the internal discussion about his retirement wasn't settled. The German Shepherd was no longer young, and some officers argued he deserved to retire so he could spend his old age peacefully. They worried that in a case of armed confrontation or a prolonged search, Max could get injured or fail to perform at the same level. Jake understood these concerns but saw that Max remained happy and healthy at work. The dog showed, every single day, that he was still perfectly able to sniff out substances and detect threats with extraordinary precision. The discovery of the kittens was indisputable proof that Max was still indispensable to the team. At a meeting, the head of airport security, a serious man named Martinez, broached the subject. "Jake, there's no doubt Max is a hero and deserves our respect. But we must think about his well-being. Airport days are stressful, and we know a 10-year-old German Shepherd's health can deteriorate suddenly." Jake took a deep breath, controlling his emotions. "With all due respect, sir, Max is still in great shape. We do regular vet checkups, and he's never been better. He loves to work, and retiring him now might just make him unhappy." Martinez stroked his chin thoughtfully. "I understand your point, but we can't ignore the signs of time. Let's do this. Take Max for a thorough vet evaluation. If the report is positive, we'll revisit the subject. We want to be sure he's not pushing himself too hard just because of his canine instinct." Jake agreed. Above all, he wanted what was best for Max. If an expert said the dog should rest, he would accept it, though he strongly believed his partner still had a lot to offer. So in the days following the kitten rescue, Max was taken to a veterinary clinic specializing in working dogs. The facility was equipped to assess both physical and mental health of animals serving in police or military roles. A renowned vet, Dr. Herrera, examined every part of Max's body, from teeth to joints, conducting tests for smell, endurance, and responses to stimuli. Jake watched anxiously as Max underwent a meticulous checkup. The dog was put on a treadmill, had blood and urine, samples taken, X-rays of his spine and legs, and heart tests. To everyone's relief, the results were surprisingly good. Although he showed the normal wear of his age, Max was extremely healthy for a dog his age. He had firm muscles, excellent heart health, and no major joint problems that would prevent him from continuing to work. "It's remarkable," said Dr. Herrera, handing over the final report. "This German Shepherd has been extremely well trained and cared for. With the right monitoring, he can keep working for another year or two without harming his health. Naturally, that assumes respecting his limits and doing regular vet checkups." Jake silently celebrated, hugging Max affectionately. With that report in hand, he could defend his partner's place on the team. Back at the airport, he showed the report to Chief Martinez. "Chief, here it is. Dr. Herrera is one of the best in the country, and his conclusions are clear. Max can stay. I promise to continue monitoring him closely." Martinez read it carefully and sighed. Very well. Max stays. But the moment we see any change, we'll discuss this again. Understood? Jake immediately agreed. He knew it was an important win, but also realized the responsibility of not pushing Max too hard. The dog remained an essential member of the team, a true four-legged hero. A few more weeks went by, and the three kittens, Nilo, Cleo, and Pharaoh, became the shelter's main stars. They made a complete recovery. Now they were bursting with energy, running around the play area, climbing scratching posts, and playing with each other. Their fur, once dull, was now shiny and strong, with those exotic markings that made them even more striking. They were healthy and ready to be adopted. The shelter received a large volume of adoption applications. Laura and Carmen carefully selected potential adopters who could meet the kittens' needs. After all, these were rare animals with specific temperaments and most likely special requirements in terms of diet and environment. When the news reached Jake that the kittens were healthy, he couldn't resist the urge to bring Max for another visit, now that they were strong and out of danger. The shelter organized a small thank you event, also inviting local journalists, to record yet another meeting between the hero dog and the rescued kittens. Unlike their previous encounter, the kittens now ran and played around Max without any fear. Cleo tried to climb his paws, and Max stood still, simply watching curiously. Nilo scurried back and forth, trying to get the dog's attention, while Pharaoh, more laid back, stayed close to Carmen, quietly watching. It was such a tender scene that some onlookers couldn't hold back tears. It was at this event that Laura announced, "We have found adopters for each of them. Qualified people who understand the kittens' history of abuse and their rarity. We interviewed them, inspected their homes, and everything indicates they will be well loved and cared for." That information gave everyone hope, but also a bit of nostalgia for those who had grown attached to the kittens at the shelter. Deep down, there was a sense of fulfillment for Max and Jake, knowing that, thanks to them, those felines had a real chance at a safe life. Even though the case was nearly closed for Spanish authorities, an international branch of the trafficking network was still active. Because of all the publicity, there were suspicions that members of the criminal organization might try to retaliate or intimidate officials who helped take down part of their ring. Jake was especially worried about Max's safety, as there were rumors that criminals might try to hurt the police dog as a grim message. Airport management increased security for the canine team. More cameras were installed in the training areas, and each officer's shift was closely supervised. However, there was no specific incident indicating a direct attack. Perhaps it was just an attempt to spread fear. Nonetheless, the Spanish police didn't underestimate the power of criminal networks profiting millions from exotic animals. Jake, cautious, took extra safety measures. He avoided posting photos of Max outside of work, asked friends and family not to mention daily routines or addresses on social media, and strictly followed airport security protocols. The whole team stood united in protecting each other, aware that attacks on officers or their dogs weren't impossible in the criminal underworld. Max's fame and the kitten story still generated occasional media interest. Between rounds, Jake would sometimes smile reading positive online comments. Generally, the public was celebrating the dog's heroism. But as the weeks passed, life returned to normal. New flights arrived, new passengers departed, and Barcelona Airport carried on its hectic rhythm. Max, always ready for action, showed renewed enthusiasm, as though the kitten rescue had given him a boost of motivation. He attentively sniffed suspicious luggage and corners of the terminal, often receiving pats on the back from fellow officers who would say, "Good job, boy." Meanwhile, Jake sometimes fielded minor interviews from local reporters who asked if there were updates on the canine hero. Jake usually answered, "Max remains strong. We're here to ensure everyone's safety." The sniffer dog's routine divided his time between airport patrols and regular training, where Max had to keep his nose tuned to different substances. He knew how to detect the smells of cocaine, marijuana, heroin, and various explosives like TNT, gunpowder, and dynamite, among others. The fact that he had located the kittens was not really part of his formal training, but his canine sensitivity led him to sense something out of place. This highlighted the importance of never underestimating a police dog's capabilities. One morning, while Jake and Max were on duty, an airport employee approached to say that someone at the staff entrance was asking for them. Jake headed that way with Max, curious. There, he found 3 people, 2 women and a man. They looked anxious, each holding a small cat carrier. Jake recognized Laura, the shelter veterinarian, and Carmen, the volunteer. The older man was Andres, who had adopted one of the kittens. "We came to say thank you again," Laura said, with a smile. "And we brought a little surprise." Inside each carrier were the kittens, Nilo, Cleo, and Pharaoh. Now bigger, they eyed the unfamiliar environment with curious gazes. Carmen explained, "We decided to bring them for a quick visit, with prior authorization, of course. They won't stay long because the airport environment might be stressful. But we wanted them to see you and Max once more before going permanently to their new homes." Jake was moved to see how much they had grown. Each wore a small colored collar, recommended by the vets for cats starting to explore bigger spaces. Max, seeing the carriers approached, wagging his tail. He seemed to recognize the scent and stared curiously at the kittens, who, in turn, peered out from behind the bars. "You can let them out a bit in the secure room if you want," Jake offered. A security guard allowed them to open a small private room rarely used by staff. Inside that controlled space, Laura and Carmen released the kittens. Without hesitation, they ran up to Max, sniffing his paws and climbing them, as comfortable as they'd been during their last encounter. It was a simple reunion, but full of meaning. Face to face once again were the dog who had been their savior, and the 3 little survivors, now grown and full of vitality. After a few minutes of interaction, Andres explained that Pharaoh would stay with him in a spacious home with 2 other rescued cats. Nilo and Cleo each had different adopters, but they lived near one another and intended to keep in touch so the siblings could still see each other. Laura and Carmen thought this was wonderful because total separation is often inevitable, but staying connected would benefit them. "Thank you, Max," Carmen said, petting the dog, who seemed to enjoy the affection. "Without you, none of these little ones would be here." It was a moment filled with gratitude. Jake, holding back tears, smiled proudly at his canine partner. The visit lasted a short time, so as not to stress the kittens in the bustling airport environment. Soon each kitten was back in its carrier, saying goodbye to Max with soft meows. Everyone present carried the memory of that brief meeting. Despite all the happiness, there were days when Jake wondered about the future. He knew Max would have to hang up his leash someday. The dog wouldn't stay young forever. For the time being, everything was fine, but the concern for Max's health and safety was constant. At night, arriving home, Jake often invited Max to rest on his padded bed in the living room corner. The German Shepherd would stretch, tired after hours of patrolling and sniffing, yet still energetic. Jake would think, "When the time comes, will Max adapt to life without airport work? He loves it so much." In contrast, each successful mission recharged Max's spirit. It was clear the dog felt pride when, at the end of a shift, he received pats, praise, or maybe a new rubber chew toy. There was a sense of fulfillment, as if Max understood that his work was not in vain, a pride that somehow shone through in his upright, focused posture. Speaking of rewards, airport management decided to award Max an honorary medal. They held a modest but heartfelt ceremony, attended by all the kennel officers, trainers, and some guests. Jake took Max on stage, where Chief Martinez gave a short speech. "Today we honor Max, a dog who embodies our greatest values: courage, persistence, and dedication. Thanks to him, we uncovered a terrible case of animal trafficking. He saved 3 defenseless lives. "Congratulations, Max, and thank you for your service." Max received a small medal that was attached to his collar. He obviously didn't grasp the significance of the object, but he could feel the joyful energy in the room, wagging his tail and looking at Jake as if waiting for instructions. Jake, in turn, was extremely proud, applauding along with everyone else. After the initial excitement, the animal trafficking case continued through the court system. At each new stage, it became clearer just how vast the criminal network was. Unfortunately, the smugglers operated in several fields, and exotic animal trafficking was just one of them. The Spanish authorities and their international partners strengthened cooperation, exchanging information to lead to more arrests and to intercept smuggling routes. On a local level, Max's story taught the airport police a lot. They realized that a sniffer dog could detect not only drugs and explosives, but also any sign of life in danger, if trained for broader awareness, rather than solely focusing on specific odors. Many sniffer dogs learn to focus exclusively on drugs or explosives, but Max demonstrated flexibility in detecting an anomaly such as weak kittens. Public opinion was also impacted. Several NGOs and animal protection groups launched campaigns to raise awareness about the cruelty and risks of trafficking wild or exotic animals. They supported responsible adoption initiatives and policies, encouraging travelers not to buy pets from illegal breeders. On a personal note, Jake reflected on how a police dog's work is more than just commands and sniffing. It's about a relationship, built on affection, empathy, and constant communication. He remembered times when people doubted Max because of his advanced age, and felt grateful that he had trusted the dog's instincts. Had he ignored Max's persistence when the bomb squad declared no explosives, the kittens might not have been found in time. On one of his days off, Jake decided to take Max for a hike in the mountains around Barcelona. It was a calm spot, where the dog could run freely among the trails, away from planes and crowds. While Max ran around sniffing bushes, Jake sat on a rock, gazing at the scenery and recalling the day they found the kittens. How many lives has Max saved in all these years? He thought. There were thwarted terrorist attempts, drug traffickers caught red-handed, and people rescued from rubble, and now 3 helpless felines. He's a real hero, he concluded, feeling his heart tighten at the thought of the day when Max would have to retire. Yet Jake knew it made no sense to suffer prematurely. He preferred to celebrate the present, the fact he had a strong, dedicated companion by his side. That hike felt like a chance to breathe outside the daily grind, a way to be thankful for such a special partnership. After a few weeks of calm at the airport, a new case demanded the attention of Jake and Max. A flight from Asia raised suspicions of drug trafficking and hidden luggage. The security team positioned themselves strategically near the carousels and corridors. Max located 2 suitcases containing a large stash of narcotics. The suspects tried to flee but were caught. Adrenaline ran high, and despite the tension, Max carried out his duty flawlessly. At the end of the day, exhausted, he lay on a rug in the K9 unit, licking his paws and panting. Jake sat beside him, placing a hand on the German Shepherd's head. "You never cease to amaze me, buddy." Though, this time it had nothing to do with kittens. Preventing drugs from entering the country was reason enough to celebrate. With each successful mission, Jake's conviction grew stronger that Max still played a vital role in the airport police. Some months later, despite all the excellent work, a routine checkup revealed signs of fatigue in Max. It wasn't anything drastic, but age was beginning to affect his hind joints, especially when he jumped or walked for long stretches on slippery floors. Jake was summoned to another meeting with Chief Martinez. "Jake, I understand this is difficult, but we need to think about Max's future. Our vet suggests reducing his workload significantly or retiring him in the next 6 months." Jake felt a pang in his heart, but looking at Max's serene face, he realized it might indeed be time to consider that option. They came up with a plan. Max would be assigned lighter duties, such as patrolling less crowded areas without the more strenuous tasks he had performed. Then gradually he would leave active service. A transition process began, allowing Max to be officially adopted by Jake upon retirement, a common practice for handlers and their service dogs. Meanwhile, the airport would begin training a new dog to take on some of Max's detection duties alongside Jake, should he wish to continue working in the K9 unit. It was a tough decision, but taken responsibly. Max had done so much. Perhaps soon he deserved to nap in the sunlight without pressure and receive his best friend's affection whenever he wanted. It would be a noble end to a four-legged hero's journey. Life went on, and months passed, edging closer to the time Max would withdraw from intense operations. Fittingly, Carmen invited Jake and Max to visit the adoptive homes of the 3 rare kittens on the anniversary of their rescue, about 1 year since they were saved. They planned to gather the felines in a safe, enclosed park so they could all meet again. On the appointed day, Jake brought Max to the fenced park Carmen had arranged. Laura, Andrzej, and the other adopters were already there. Nilo, Cleo, and Pharaoh were unrecognizable compared to the malnourished little kittens from before. They were now large, gorgeous, with exotic fur, shining and bright eyes. Each had a distinct personality, but all looked well cared for and confident as Max appeared. The 3 cats pricked up their ears and approached cautiously. Obviously, they had grown and viewed the world differently now, but there was still familiarity in the air. Cleo rubbed noses with Max, recalling the earlier gesture. Nilo gave a few meows, playfully batting at the dog's tail, while Pharaoh, calmer, sat close by, quietly observing. It was a sweet moment of connection, each sniff a reminder of the day Max discovered them, saving their lives. Jake watched with a heart full of joy. He thought of everything that had happened. Max's alert, the dramatic rescue, the struggle for survival, the adoption, the trafficker's arrest. Now they were all here, healthy and safe. More than ever, Jake felt Max had fulfilled his purpose, and that maybe it was time to let his partner enjoy a well-deserved rest, free from constant duty. Time ticked on, and finally the official day of Max's retirement arrived. A small gathering was held in the airport's K9 unit. The officers, who had worked with him, trainers, vets, and some family members were present. There were speeches, a cake, and lots of photos. Max walked around sniffing at the treats, oblivious to the ceremony's significance, yet certainly sensing the celebratory tone. At the end of the event, Jake signed formal papers authorizing Max's adoption. "Now you're officially coming home with me, buddy," he said, patting the German Shepherd's head. Emotion overcame everyone as Max received his last formal command, a symbolic way of marking the end of his career. From that moment, he was no longer an active-duty police dog but a retiree with honors. In the following days, getting used to not going on patrol was odd for Max. He was restless on the first mornings, as though asking, "Hey, where's my job?" Jake had to adjust their routine so Max would have regular walks, distractions, and light fetch exercises to keep his sense of smell sharp without overburdening him. Over time, the transition became less abrupt. The German Shepherd found new joy in chewing toys and running in the park, without the same pressure as before. Still, Max's story lived on at Barcelona Airport. A photo of him wearing his honorary medal was hung in a gallery showcasing the heroes and highlights of airport security. New dogs arrived to take on sniffing duties, guided by Jake, who was now training the next generation. The old German Shepherd served as an inspiration for the newcomers, whose mission, to keep passengers safe, would continue for years to come. Sometimes Jake brought Max by the airport for a visit, just to see their old friends. Wearing a leash, and in a more relaxed posture, Max enjoyed pats and greetings from everyone who recognized the legendary dog. Those who didn't know him were astonished to learn that this senior canine had once played a leading role in so many operations. At home, Max found comfort in being allowed on the couch, a special retirement privilege granted by Jake. He would bask in long naps in the sunlight while Jake went off to work. By evening, when Jake returned, they shared peaceful moments, free of the previous rush. The German Shepherd, despite his years, would still perk his ears at any noise near the door. His police instincts never fully faded. As for the 3 kittens, now cats, they lived happily in their new homes. Occasionally, Carmen and Laura sent photos to Jake, showing how the animals were thriving. They were healthy, dazzling, without any trace of the suffering that had nearly claimed their lives. It was one of the most touching cases in Jake's career, and in everyone's who took part in their rescue. Thus, the tale of Max and the kittens became something of a local legend. But most of all, it imparted invaluable lessons. Never underestimate an animal's intuition, especially when lives are on the line. Age doesn't define someone's worth, whether dog or human, because dedication, experience, and heart matter. More animal trafficking is cruel and must be fought rigorously, as countless innocent lives depend on it. We can all be heroes in our own way, by saving animals in danger, adopting a needy pet, or reporting illegal practices. Max's policing journey came to an end, but his legacy and bravery lived on. Whenever Jake passed near a suspicious suitcase, he remembered the day Max defied all odds by detecting something undetectable to the bomb squad, proving that a dedicated dog's nose can make the difference between life and death, for people or tiny, defenseless kittens. If you made it this far, thank you for reading and for your interest in this story, so full of values like courage, friendship, and respect for animals. Remember that animal trafficking is a serious problem, and we can all help by reporting suspicious situations to the proper authorities, supporting animal protection NGOs, and acting responsibly with both pets and wild animals. Max's lesson is clear. We mustn't give up on what we believe in, even if many doubt our capacity. Love and perseverance can overcome countless obstacles. Until next time, and may this story inspire everyone to respect and value not only police dogs, but all creatures with whom we share this world.